What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. Hope everybody's doing well on this Wednesday afternoon. Sorry for the technical difficulties that we had with the previous live stream, but we got everything up and running, fully operational now. This is NFL Wednesdays. I told you guys last week that we were going to be separating the college football live streams from the NFL live streams, and we got a lot to discuss on this episode. The Indianapolis Colts are going back to Anthony Richardson at quarterback. The Dallas Cowboys, they got a lot going on right now. They're a car wreck. You got Michael Parsons talking out of pocket about his head coach, Jerry Jones being delusional like always. We already got some casualties for the dysfunctional Chicago Bears going on right now. We knew that something was going to happen. Somebody was going to lose their job after their first overall pick at quarterback has gone an entire month without throwing a single touchdown. And the first casualty was offensive coordinator Shane Waldron. He has been fired. Got some thoughts on that. We're going to break down some of the NFL's most interesting games in Week 10. There's been a lot of hype around the Steelers potentially being a dark horse Super Bowl team. And I'm not really ready to go that far just quite yet with this team. But if they can beat the Baltimore Ravens this Sunday, I will be one step in that direction when it comes to hopping on the Steelers Super Bowl bandwagon. The Denver Broncos played the Atlanta Falcons. This is a game that is going to get overlooked because neither team is in the Super Bowl discussion, but this is going to be a game to tell us a lot about how good both of these two teams are, because you got a Broncos team that came really close to beating the Chiefs last week. And I really believe that the Broncos can make it into the playoffs this year. But if that's going to happen, them beating Atlanta is going to get them one step closer to that goal, because the Atlanta Falcons, like the Broncos, they're a decent football team, but you will like to see them play some good games against some of the best competition that they have coming up on their schedule over the next 3 weeks. And of course, the game that we all are going to be focused on, the undefeated Kansas City Chiefs are going on the road to take on Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Could the Bills finally do us all a favor and give the Chiefs their first L of the season? Just show us that Kansas City can be beat. And I got my 5 best bets for Week 11 of the NFL season. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in wherever you're watching. YouTube, X, Facebook. Smash that like button. Subscribe if you're new. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we go live and drop new content. Shout out to Kate Roan with the $10 donation. We greatly appreciate it. As always, she says, what's happening with the Bears and firing Shane Waldron? Is it another NFL franchise on fire? And I believe in Pittsburgh for the W. Does JT? Can't wait to hear your takes, man. Powerful JT Sports Live. Greatly appreciate you with the $10 donation, Kate Roan. Everybody that's tuned in, man, we're in for a really fun episode tonight. Before we dive in, give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast from. Apple, Spotify, Amazon. The links are down in the description down below. Send your mailbag questions in on Instagram at JT_Sports_ and on X at JT___. I will be doing a mailbag episode either later tonight or early tomorrow morning when I wake up. So if you got a question that you would like answered on our mailbag episode, go ahead, send them on the DMs, wherever you want to send them through. Instagram at JT__ and on X at JT___. Now let's dive into it. The Indianapolis Colts, you could not live with your failure. You've lost 3 straight. 2 out of 3 of those losses have come with Joe Flacco at quarterback. And where did that bring you? Back to Anthony Richardson. And this was a move that had to happen. Joe Flacco, the sole reason why they started him over AR in the first place was because they believed he gave the Colts the best chance to win. But when you throw 4 interceptions to only 2 touchdowns in your last 2 starts, and the Colts still are losing games, nothing has changed. And when you are a veteran quarterback, you don't expect for them to be throwing, pick sixes early during the game and just having so many turnover issues that they cost you games where you already have a rookie quarterback who had the similar problem. And if you're going to lose, you might as well lose with your younger quarterback. Let Anthony Richardson go out there, get all the development he needs. And if you're able to make it to the playoffs with Anthony Richardson, then cool, because you're not out of it. Believe it or not, you still have a good chance at being able to win the AFC South, because I don't know how many of you guys have been paying attention to the Houston Texans, but they don't look that hot right now. CJ Stroud is in the slump. Their offensive line is terrible. They have no identity on offense. And they're about to get into the tough stretch of their schedule, which gives the Colts a good opportunity to backdoor their way to a potential AFC South title if they can find a way to have an efficient offense with Anthony Richardson, which, if they can run the football well with Jonathan Taylor and him in the backfield, you got a really good chance of taking away this division from the Texans, because we're at a part of the NFL season now where a lot of these games are going to be cold, and running the football is really important at this time of the season. And when you got two monsters in the backfield, Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson, it makes your offense more physical, because you can be a more run-centric team. You can put more emphasis on using design quarterback runs to get Anthony Richardson going early. The thing with Anthony Richardson is that he's not a total terrible quarterback. He does have moments where he's able to make some big throws downfield, when he's able to get outside the pocket and use his God-given athleticism that got him drafted so high by Indianapolis in the first place. This is the perfect time of the season to start using some of Anthony Richardson's athletic gifts, which the Colts, they kind of were a little bit hesitant to run Anthony Richardson so much because he already has been banged up a decent amount of times. But at this point, if Anthony Richardson is going to develop, you need for him to be a reliable runner more than you need him to be a reliable passer, because this guy isn't just magically going to turn into a great passer overnight. And it's not going to happen this season if we're being realistic. Anthony Richardson's growth is going to take place during the offseason. Next year is when we can expect for him to have a 2015 Cam Newton kind of season. But this year, though, the Colts can still find a way to turn their season around, get into the playoffs by winning this division by leaning more heavy into the ground game. And with Anthony Richardson being so big and physical at 255, running 4.43, nobody really wants to tackle this at this time of the year. You think a defensive back 101 wants to see Anthony Richardson in the open field? No, and neither do they want to see Jonathan Taylor in the open field as well. Running the football is what's going to propel Indianapolis to turn their season around possibly. And the thing with Anthony Richardson is that, he needed a little bit of a breather. He had to tap out a few weeks ago. He needed a little bit of rest. So they gave him 2 weeks to think a lot of things over. I was listening to his interview that he just did a few hours ago, his reaction to getting back the starting job. And it seems like he has grown from that experience. And he didn't lose the locker room. A lot of his teammates, after he got benched, they supported him. They gave him words of encouragement, and guys still felt like he was good enough to be the franchise quarterback of the future for this team. So the fact that the locker room still has confidence in him despite him not being that accurate as a passer shows that these guys are willing to put up with some of the growing pains as long as it means that the Colts are better off in the future. So that's definitely something that you love to hear if you're a Colts fan, because now that means that you have a team that is 110% on board with what the future is and direction that this team wants to head. And it's not a surprise that his teammates are in favor of him getting back the job, because when you got a veteran quarterback in Joe Flacco, you can't tolerate the turnovers and the boneheaded mistakes that Joe Flacco was making. And over these past 2 weeks with Anthony Richardson on the bench, everybody got a glimpse of what Joe Flacco truly is. He was a great story, but these last couple of weeks, we found out that he's not Superman, and that's what the Colts thought he was going to be. They thought that benching Anthony Richardson in favor of Joe Flacco would make the offense better than what it was. But all the offense was still stagnant. You were still having a hard time being efficient, scoring in the red zone. So it made a lot of sense to make this move to go back to Anthony Richardson. You can't say Joe Flacco gave this team the best chance to win with how they played these last couple of weeks. It just makes a lot of sense to go back to the younger guy, let him get this experience, and maybe him spending a little bit of time on the bench to reflect can maybe help him become somewhat of a better quarterback now. Because when you have time to reflect on what went wrong, it gives you a little bit of time to have some retrospective about yourself. And when you get benched, it's a good opportunity to look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, how did I get here if you're Anthony Richardson? And what can I do better to not allow a situation like this to occur again? And the Indianapolis Colts at 4-6 right now, you still have a lot of ball left to be played. It's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. And around this time is when you want to heat up. This is when you want to play your best football. And the early, mid stages of November is when teams start to separate themselves. And the Houston Texans right now, they haven't separated themselves to the point where you don't have a chance to take this division. They're not playing good football, neither have you. With you playing the New York Jets, you got a chance to right the ship against a team that has a really bad coach and they don't have a good overall team. The Jets are far from that. If anything, the Jets are just one person and a bunch of individuals. The Colts have a team, and by going back to Anthony Richardson, this could give your team a spark that reunites the locker room, brings everybody together, and then eventually you can use this to turn this thing around. But going back to Anthony Richardson was something that had to happen. If you're going to lose games and you're going to tolerate mistakes from anybody at quarterback, you might as well tolerate it from Anthony Richardson. The Dallas Cowboys are absolutely spiraling out of control. You got Michael Parsons making out-of-pocket comments after the game against Philadelphia about Mike McCarthy, a Super Bowl winning head coach, by the way. Michael Parsons said that, you know, some of the guys on the team, like Zach Martin, put in way more time for these games than what Mike McCarthy does. And it just was really weird for Michael Parsons to say that, with that being the first game that he has played in the last couple of weeks due to injury. And I'm not going to say that Michael Parsons is overrated. A lot of you Cowboy fans know that Michael Parsons is one of the best edge rushers in the NFL, but he doesn't necessarily show up in the biggest games or the biggest moments. But against Philadelphia, he had a really good game, in my opinion. But what he said after that loss was really uncalled for. One thing that you should never do, regardless of how bad things are turning out for you during the season, is throw guys under the bus. Rather it be teammates, coaches, there has to be a mutual level of respect. And I'm not even mad at Michael Parsons for making these comments, because how can you get mad at Michael Parsons for talking when you got an owner that never shuts the hell up? Jerry Jones is always talking, and every time Jerry Jones talks, he makes the Dallas Cowboys situation look 1,000 times worse. This dude is just delusional. They asked him about, you know, the glare from how the stadium is designed that caused CeeDee Lamb to miss a wide open touchdown grab. And he says, man, we designed the stadium to be advantageous to us and we don't plan on making any changes. Okay, so you're just going to continue to let the sun beam in some of your wide receivers' faces and cost them, some drops? Come on now, Jerry. You should be doing whatever it takes to best help this team. If you got to put some curtains to keep the sun from glaring in your wide receivers' eyes, go ahead and do that, because at this point, it seems like Jerry Jones doesn't even care about winning anymore. How can he? When you're making trades for Jonathan Mingo, you don't care about the sun being in your wide receivers' eyes. It's a pretty clear indicator that Jerry Jones either wants to tank or he's just flat out delusional. And I think that both things can be true in this situation. Everybody is mad at Michael Parsons, criticizing him for his comments about Mike McCarthy, but Jerry Jones is the one who has set this precedent in the locker room. He's the one that isn't holding anybody accountable because he doesn't even hold himself accountable. So why are we surprised that Michael Parsons is making these kinds of out-of-pocket comments about his head coach when Jerry Jones does nothing but make out-of-pocket statements and a bunch of lies? This was the same person who at the start of this year said that the Cowboys were going all in, and the only moves they made that quote-unquote were all in were re-signing CeeDee Lamb, paying Dak Prescott, who now is out for the season, and bringing back Ezekiel Elliott. That was it. So if you should be mad at anybody, don't be mad at Michael Parsons. He's just doing what Jerry Jones has allowed to take place in this locker room. Jerry Jones doesn't even have enough respect for Mike McCarthy to say, things aren't going our way, but Mike McCarthy, we're going to stick with him. I still believe in him. You don't never hear a vote of confidence out of Jerry Jones when it comes to Mike. All he gives you is vague answers about Mike McCarthy. We don't plan on making any coaching changes. If you really believe in Mike McCarthy, even if you are going to let him go, at least somewhat pretend like you do. We know Jerry Jones doesn't believe in this dude. Jerry Jones is doing whatever he wants to because this is his team, and he can do as he pleases, but he's torturing this fan base. And Cowboy fans, it's not even fun to make fun of them anymore. Normally, I enjoy picking at Cowboy fans because they're always delusional. They always think they can win it all every single season, even though we know that that's not going to happen. But this year, though, it just isn't no point going at Cowboy fans because you're basically kicking somebody when they're already down and they can't use their legs to get back up because they're broken. They know how bad this season was going to turn out. Yeah, did they have a little bit of optimism? Yeah, of course, but that's every fan base. Even Raiders fans thought they could win 10 games. So you can't get mad at Cowboy fans for having a little bit of optimism for this season. This fan base understood what was going to happen this year. This was not a well-constructed team. The reason why the Cowboys have one of the worst records in the NFL at this moment is because Jerry Jones did a poor job of building a team that was equipped to win it all. Which is why his all-in comments are now so infamous, because this team was the complete opposite of what it looks to be all in. If anything, they were all out on trying to win a Super Bowl. When you extend Dak Prescott, who has scammed this franchise out of millions of dollars for the last couple of years, Dak Prescott is one of the highest paid players in the NFL, who always looks good in the regular season. But then once we get to the biggest part of the year, the playoffs, when legends are made and you only need 4 games of good football out of this dude to hoist that Lombardi trophy, he always comes up small. And this is the worst season that Dak Prescott has had up to this point in his career. And you know, with him being out for the season, he's been trying to get second opinions, but he's going through the surgery anyway. You might as well just sit the rest of the season out, because you weren't really making the Cowboys a better team anyway with how bad you were playing. I've never seen Dak Prescott look this bad, this inaccurate. The Cowboys just need to burn this thing down. They need to reset, and they need to find a way to get a restraining order against Jerry Jones, because the way that he runs this team It just seems like he just doesn't care. He just wants all the control. He wants to be the coach. He wants to be the GM. He wants to be the owner. He wants to be the face of the franchise. Jerry Jones just wants it all. He wants his hands in the cookie jar. He wants his cake, and he wants to eat it too. And you got to be delusional if you think that Bill Belichick or any top head coaching candidate is going to want to put up with his nonsense. It's no wonder guys like Michael Parsons can say whatever they want, throw their head coach under the bus and face no consequences, because look what Jerry Jones does. He's the only owner in the league that always has press conferences after the game. He has a weekly radio show. Do you know any other owner that talks as much to the press as what Jerry Jones is? Probably not, because most of the times you never hear from the owner like that. You know when a guy is a bad owner. But at the same time, a lot of bad owners, as crazy as they may be, they're not always talking nonstop like how Jerry Jones is. So if you want Michael Parsons to shut his mouth, tell Jerry Jones to shut some of his mouth. You feel me? I get you're the owner and you got the right to speak, but do you really need to be talking every day, every week about your team? You're the GM, the owner. Get somebody else to be the GM. How about you do less of the talking and you hire somebody else to do a little bit more of the talking for you, who can also make better informed decisions? Did we see Jonathan Mingo play last week against Philadelphia? Because I only watched the first 2 quarters and a half until I flipped to another game, and I didn't hear Jonathan Mingo's name called once. You know, they did give up a good amount to get him, and yet we didn't hear his name once during the first half against Philadelphia. And the Dallas Cowboys have a big need for a talented wide receiver. And you get Jonathan Mingo, you're going to overpay for him and not play him that much. This just shows how far gone and how delusional Jerry Jones is, because he can't understand that the reason why the Cowboys are in this position is because of him. He has constructed a poor roster that doesn't have depth, doesn't have that much talent on offense. And what do you expect Mike McCarthy to do with this? You basically gave Mike McCarthy shit, and you're saying, hey, Big Mike, this is your contract year. We're going to give you a crappy roster. Find a way to turn it into gold. Jerry Jones, with the precedent that he has set in his locker room, it's no wonder the Cowboys are such a big car wreck right now. There's no accountability because he doesn't have accountability. He refuses to accept the blame for how bad things have transpired for the Cowboys this season. And at this point, listen, I don't wish any harm on anybody, but the Cowboys are going to continue to be this way until Jerry Jones can no longer run this team. He has to turn into Joe Biden before somebody steps in and says, hey, Jerry, like, you feel me? You got to go, bro. You just don't have it mentally anymore to be running this team. He's like 80-something years old. Anybody else this age will barely be talking that much. He has to be one of the oldest owners in the league that talks the most. Most of the times, you never hear anything out of the owner. Regardless of how bad things are going, the owner may only talk maybe 2-3 times during the season. That's about it. But we hear from Jerry Jones every doggone day. So if you're going to get mad at Michael Parsons for speaking his mind, get mad at Jerry Jones for allowing this to take place. I haven't heard Jerry Jones say anything about Michael Parsons' comments about Mike McCarthy. If anything, he might have told Michael, hey, like, you feel me? Go ahead and get this off your chest, because I feel the same way. Basically, what Michael Parsons said is, you're a crappy coach and I don't respect you. And that's pretty much what Jerry Jones has been doing to Mike McCarthy. I feel bad for how Mike McCarthy has been treated in this situation, believe it or not. Am I wrong for feeling that way? You're telling this guy to work with nothing. You're giving him Trey Lance and Cooper Rush as his backup. The season is over for Dallas. At this point, just go ahead and tank for Ashton Genty. At least you can get a good consolation prize out of this torture that Jerry Jones is putting this fan base through. And y'all are a really passionate fan base. That's why I love coming at y'all. But it's no fun coming at the Cowboys fandom anymore, because everybody just knows what it is. And, you know, to be honest, Cowboy fans are probably ready for this season to be over with so they can just have some reason to be optimistic for next year because it's a new season, it's a clean slate, and maybe Jerry Jones will get somebody in to make some new decisions, build a better team, but who knows? But at this point, the season for Dallas is over. This is a car wreck, man. We already knew that changes were on the rise when the Chicago Bears lost to the New England Patriots. And their first overall pick at quarterback, the guy who was supposed to be a generational talent, has gone an entire month without throwing a single touchdown pass. And we knew that somebody was going to have to get fired with how ugly of a loss the Bears took to the Patriots. You lost 19-3 to a team whose defense has not been that good, and offensively they just been average at best. And yet Caleb Williams was sacked 9 times in their 19-3 loss against New England. He's been sacked 7 times when they played the Houston Texans on Sunday night, and he got sacked 6 times a few weeks ago against the Arizona Cardinals. The Bears now are 31st in sacks allowed, allowing 3.5 sacks per game, only ahead of the Cleveland Browns, who are allowing nearly 5 sacks per game. And Shane Waldron, we knew that he was going to end up being the first casualty of the Chicago Bears dysfunction, because somebody has to go, because Matt Eberflus has to try to do everything he can to delay the inevitable, which is him losing his job. But here's what the kicker is. We know that Matt Eberflus, at this point, he's a dead man walking in Chicago. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. This thing is going to spiral so left to the point Ryan Poles has no other options but to cut ties with Matt Eberflus. And I kind of asked myself, did the Chicago Bears make a mistake trading away Justin Fields? Because this offense was better when Justin Fields was the starting quarterback as compared to what it is now with Caleb Williams. At least you were better running the football with Justin Fields. Caleb Williams, he's a good athlete, but he's nowhere near the athlete that Justin Fields is. And at the same time, you got to hold Caleb Williams more responsible if you're a Bears fan for how he has played. Yes, the situation that you're in, how good your coaching staff is, does have a big impact on how good your rookie quarterback performs. But what we also have to understand is that when you get drafted first overall, you're supposed to overcome situations like this to a certain extent. Yeah, you can't overcome everything, bad offensive line play, bad coaching, but it's not like Caleb Williams is in a completely terrible situation like how Bryce Young has been with the Carolina Panthers for the last 2 years. At least Caleb Williams has a really good group of wide receivers. He has some weapons on offense, a lot of weapons as a matter of fact, and he's just not that accurate. He looks like the same player in the pros as he was at USC. He hasn't made any development. And we thought that we saw Caleb Williams make somewhat of a turning point with how well he played against the Jaguars in London, and the Chicago Bears went on a little bit of a run. But now that this team is actually going up against teams that are somewhat decently coached, and you're not beating up on the most pathetic team in the league right now, that being the Jags, you're getting exposed. And Andrew Luck, when he was drafted first overall by the Colts nearly a decade ago, he carried that squad. He carried Chuck Pagano as the head coach. He only had T.Y. Hilton being his best receiver, not really that much of a run game, and the offensive line always sucked, but yet he was able to overcome it and elevate the Colts. How does Caleb Williams elevate the Bears? This is the same person who got outplayed by another rookie quarterback from his same draft class in Drake May, who most of us perceive to be in an even worse situation than what Caleb Williams is with the New England Patriots. He doesn't have a DJ Moore or a Keenan Allen on that team. His best receiver has been Kayshon Boutte and tight end Hunter Henry. And yet Caleb Williams got outplayed by Drake May despite having a better situation of the two. Yes, there is a lot of blame that goes on the Bears organization, as we all know, they're notoriously known for destroying young quarterbacks, from Mitch Trubisky to Justin Fields to now with Caleb Williams. You know what they say, history repeats itself. But Caleb Williams was supposed to be a lot better than what he's been this year. He can't even hit the layups. He doesn't take the easy throws. He doesn't take the checkdowns. And he also isn't really that aggressive. I look at Caleb Williams and I'm like, bro, you kind of look a little bit worse now than what you looked at USC. And I was on the Caleb Williams hype train. Trading away Justin Fields basically was the Chicago Bears repeating the same cycle that they've been doing for the last couple of years with these quarterbacks. They were better off giving Justin Fields another year, probably hiring a better coordinator than Shane Waldron, because I keep seeing these quotes from Bears players. I get asked about Shane Waldron and what went wrong. Keenan Allen just put out something saying he was too much of a nice guy. And the Bears did an extensive search, by the way, for their next offensive coordinator. They interviewed like 8 guys for this position, and Shane Waldron was the dude who impressed them the most, when this was the same guy who didn't really do that much to help maximize Russell Wilson's career near the tail end of his tenure at the Seattle Seahawks, because they couldn't run the football. They couldn't protect Russ. So it's no surprise that the offensive coordinator that couldn't give Russell Wilson a little bit more help, that relied on Russell Wilson to play a lot of hero ball that has success, is the reasoning for a little bit of Caleb Williams' disappointing rookie season. Now, Matt Eberflus, as a head coach, he does a really good job with the defense. But offensively, they just look lost out there. And at this point, you know, he's nothing more but a dead man walking down there in the Windy City. Because when you're a defensive-minded coach and your offense can't figure it out, your team is going to struggle because you don't have enough knowledge on that side of the football to be able to fix some of the big issues. All Matt Eberflus can do is, you know, move some guys around on the offensive line, cut some guys, trade some guys, but nothing really is going to change. At this point of the season, who you are is what you are. And what the Chicago Bears are a poorly coached team on offense with a rookie quarterback that just looks distraught out there. He looks like a chicken with his head cut off. At some point, the Bears are going to continue to lose, and you're going to have to start saying, okay, you know what? Enough of this. Let's just go ahead and cut bait with the main problem, which is Matt Eberflus. He's a good guy. He has tried his best. He got Nick Saban in there during the offseason on Hard Knocks to give him advice about how to help Caleb Williams develop. But yet, none of that is working. And Matt Eberflus may just be one of those coaches that's a good coordinator. He's just not cut out to be a head coach because he's not good at managing a team. I feel like when him and Ryan Poles made the concerted decision to draft Caleb Williams and move on from Justin Fields, it was because Matt Eberflus felt if he had this generational quarterback, it could save his job. He could ask Caleb Williams to be Superman, but no matter how good or how generational of a quarterback prospect you are, you still have to be coached. You still have to be developed. It's like Matt Eberflus thought Caleb Williams was going to develop himself. The Chicago Bears are 13th in the league in passing attempts per game with the worst offensive line arguably in the league. That's unacceptable. You're 30th in yards per game. You're 24th in scoring. And you're second to last in third down conversion percentage. You're 23rd in rushing yards per game. You're 28th in yards per rush. Caleb Williams needs to play better, but no matter who they end up turning to as their new OC, nothing's going to change because this is just what the Bears are. The only way they can turn this thing around is if they just go old school 1985 Chicago Bears, rely on their defense, and they just run the air out of the football with DeAndre Swift and whoever they got behind them at running back. Because you can't ask Caleb Williams to keep winning games for you by throwing it 30 plus. That's not winning football. The only way you're going to win with Caleb Williams is asking him to throw the football probably 20 to 25 times a game. Because with how bad your offensive line is, you can't do anything but run a lot of bubble screens and quick outs to get the ball out of his hands fast, and eventually defenses are going to catch on to that. You might as well just go ahead, run the football a lot, try to take the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands as much as possible to try to help him out and help regain some of his confidence. But when you are just a franchise that just struggles to develop quarterbacks, you keep repeating the same cycle. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over again and get the same results. And that's why the Chicago Bears right now, their seasoning is going left. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Shout out to my guy, Josh, the MC. He says, as a Cowboys fan, I'm glad Dak is done for the year because at least we'll get a high draft picks. We better use it to get Genty. Shout out to my guy, the Robster Report. He says, should have drafted the left tackle instead of a wide receiver. Ryan Poles' fault there. Yeah, because I haven't even heard Roma Dunze's name called that much. Yeah, that was that's a good point as well. They thought that getting all these receivers was all they needed to help Caleb Williams when they knew that offensive line needed more additions. But they were confident with the guys they had last year. But when you change, to a new offensive coordinator and you change the scheme around, some guys just aren't going to be a good fit for the new system. There's been a lot of hype around the Steelers' Super Bowl chances. Now, I'm not ready to hop on the Steelers Super Bowl hype train quite yet, but if they can beat the Baltimore Ravens this Sunday, it will be a step in the direction, or it will be a step in the right direction in terms of the Steelers being a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Because the Baltimore Ravens, to me, are the third best team in the NFL, right behind the Chiefs and the Detroit Lions. They've dominated a good amount of the teams that they've played on their schedule, like the Denver Broncos, who have proven to be a quality opponent. And Lamar Jackson is on his way to his third MVP. But as we all know, Lamar Jackson's kryptonite is the Pittsburgh Steelers. As a matter of fact, the Steelers are the only team in the NFL that has a winning record against Lamar Jackson. He's 2-4 all the time against this squad. He has 4 touchdowns to 7 interceptions in his career against the Steelers. And the Steelers have sacked Lamar Jackson 4 times or more in the last 4 matchups. And when you look at how good the Steelers' defense has been this year, they've been really good against the run. Yeah, they've had a couple of games when the Colts and the Giants went off, but for the most part, this has been a consistent defense when it comes to slowing down the run game, the 4th in the NFL in rushing yards per game allowed, and you're going up against a Ravens offense that is averaging nearly 200 yards on the ground at 182.6 per game. They got the #1 run offense in the league. You got Derrick Henry, who not only leads the NFL in carries, but he's currently leading the league in rushing yards, over 1,100, and he leads the NFL in touchdowns. The Steelers obviously got to find a way to slow Derrick Henry down, which I believe they have the players to do so. Patrick Queen could be a really big X factor in this game for the Steelers, and he needs to have a big performance. Because I haven't really seen a lot of good play out of Patrick Queen. He's been all right, but not what I expected for the amount of money that they paid him in free agency. And the good thing is that the Ravens really rely on Derrick Henry late in the 4th quarter of games, because what Derrick Henry is for Baltimore is their closer. He's the person who they go to close out games, because once you get into the final 7-8 minutes of the ball game, you don't want to tackle a guy like Derrick Henry because he's so big, so strong, and you're already tired as it is running around trying to chase Lamar Jackson down, to where when Derrick Henry comes in, he just completely can take over the game at that point because your defense is already depleted, and it helps the Ravens close out those games because they don't really have to rely on Lamar Jackson to do so. That's what their goal was with signing Derrick Henry. Not for him to really be the focal point of their offense per se every game, but to be able to close out tough games in the 4th quarter. That's what Derrick Henry is going to be for Baltimore in this game. This is going to be a tight game. This isn't going to be a blowout because we know how this rivalry is. It's physical, a lot of hard hitting, and normally these games are pretty close. Last year when Lamar went up against the Steelers, a lot of people in the media scrutinized him for how he played when, in all honesty, as a Steelers fan, Lamar played a good game. It's just that his receivers were letting him down. In this game, the Ravens receivers got to step up. You need a good game out of Zay Flowers. You need a big game from somebody else, whether that be Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, maybe Deontay Johnson can get some revenge because Mike Tomlin did throw a little bit of shade on him. Somebody asked Mike Tomlin during one of his press conferences, what's the game plan when you're going up against Deontay Johnson, somebody that you're very familiar with? And Mike Tomlin, like always, with this great quote, said that we're not ready. We're not really worried about anybody when the Ravens got so many weapons as it is. Why are we going to be worried about somebody who really isn't going to have that big of an impact on this game because he's not going to be used that much? And that was true. Why are we worried about Deontay Johnson when, he's not really that big of a factor in this offense yet? Now, when the Steelers play the Ravens for the second time this season, then we could be seeing a little bit more of Deontay Johnson. But as much as I love DJ, I'm not expecting him to be a major contributor for the Ravens in this game. So, of course, it makes sense for Mike Tomlin to not really pay that much attention to him. And the Steelers offensively, you know that ever since they made the quarterback change from Justin to Russell Wilson, this went from an offense that was scoring 20 points per game to 30 points per game with Russ. And he's been really good throwing the football downfield. You saw he pretty much had that game-winning touchdown to Mike Williams. Him and George Pickens have had a really good relationship. And when you're going up against this Ravens secondary, you're going to have the opportunity to get a lot of big plays in the vertical passing game, which is what the Steelers have done very well since they made the quarterback switch to Russ. And we saw what Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase did to this Ravens secondary on Thursday Night Football. And now, with you having Mike Williams on your squad, you got two big play wide receivers that are physical, have great size, great length, and they can win those one-on-one matchups downfield. They can come down with those 50-50 balls against a porous Ravens secondary. Now, one thing that the Ravens defense does well that's going to give the Steelers a little bit of room to be concerned is how well they are against the run. The Ravens currently have the best run defense in the NFL. They're allowing 73 rushing yards per game, which is outstanding. And the Steelers, they run the football more than the majority of teams in the league. And when you take away the run game from Pittsburgh, you make them one-dimensional because you now erase their ability to utilize play action, which is what Russell Wilson has done a really good job at. And now you force this to become a team that has to solely rely on Russell Wilson to win the game. And as good as what Russell Wilson has been, the Steelers haven't really asked him to have to carry this team to a win. Well, this might be a game where Russell Wilson has to carry the Steelers on his back. I'm not saying that he can't do that. But what I am saying that it makes it incredibly difficult when you got a guy who may not be what he used to be, and he has to go toe-to-toe with what should be the third MVP of Lamar Jackson's career. It's really hard to ask Russell Wilson to go toe-to-toe with arguably the best quarterback in football right now. So if the Steelers are going to win this game, you're going to need your defense to be able to hold Baltimore's offense to under 20 points in this game. If this becomes a shootout, and Baltimore is able to break this thing open and they get the 28, 30 points and the Steelers have to go toe-to-toe with them. Offensively, it becomes a shootout where they just got to throw the football to keep up. They're going to be in trouble because that's not the kind of team that the Steelers are. The Steelers are a team that if they're going to beat you, it's going to be because they can run the football and they can also throw it as well. They're not a team that can solely beat you just relying on the passing attack. And the Ravens do have a pretty good pass rush. They don't have any household names on their defensive line, but they do have Justin Madubuike. You do have Odafe Oweh, who has started to come on for Baltimore over the last couple of weeks. So with how good the Ravens pass rush is, and you still got an offensive line that's pretty young and it's been a little bit up and down, this could be a game where the Steelers find themselves having to rely on their defense to really come through for them. You're going to need TJ Watt to do what he does best, make game-changing plays, be able to keep Lamar Jackson at bay. And I got into it with somebody earlier who said that if the Steelers can force Lamar Jackson to be a pocket passer, then they win this game. That's an idiotic statement to me. Because as a Steelers fan, you got to at least respect how good Lamar Jackson is as not just a runner but a passer as well. He leads the NFL in touchdown passes and quarterback rating, and he has the best touchdown to interception ratio in the league. So if you give Lamar Jackson time to carve you up in the pocket, he's going to do so. There really is no way to stop Lamar. The only thing you can hope to do is contain him. As cliche as that sounds, Lamar Jackson is one of those players where he's going to make plays no matter what you do. You only hope that when he does make those plays, you're able to come back the following play and be able to have a big play for a tackle for loss or a big sack, which kind of takes away a little bit of that momentum from the Ravens offense. But once the Ravens offense gets going and they're rolling, they're really hard to stop. They can put 30 points up on anybody with ease. And Lamar Jackson, he's going to be really motivated to have a good game. He knows what people say about him when he plays the Steelers. He knows that people consider this team to be his kryptonite. So I really believe that the Ravens are going to win this game. But I do think that the Steelers are going to split the season series. But this game is going to show us a lot about just if the Steelers truly are Super Bowl contenders. Because if the Steelers can win this game, then they create a little bit of distance for themselves in terms of the AFC North title chase. Because right now they're in first place in this division. But if the Ravens win, then they take that first place spot from them. And this also is a game that's going to kick off the toughest stretch of the schedule for the Steelers. The teams that they have to play to close out the rest of this year is going to show just if this is a team that can make a Super Bowl run in the postseason, because you got to play the Bengals twice, the Browns twice, and despite how down the Browns have been this year, you can't overlook anybody in this division. You also got to play the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs along the stretch as well. So the Steelers got one of, if not the hardest second half schedule in the NFL. Right now, you got out to a fast start, but the Steelers got out to a fast start last year, and they kind of crumbled down the stretch around this time. Remember, they got upset back-to-back weeks by the Cardinals and the Patriots, who were two of the worst teams in the NFL at that moment last year. So I could somewhat see the same thing that happened around this time last year happening again with how the difficulty is about to ramp up for this team. Washington was more of a quiz. Now playing the Ravens this week is the midterm exam for the Steelers. Are they going to ace it with flying colors? Are they going to remain on top of the AFC North? Or are the Ravens going to get the best of them and Lamar actually is able to get one up on Mike Tomlin? We will see in this game. But before I can consider the Steelers Super Bowl contenders, I got to see what they look like against Baltimore, because Baltimore, to me, looks like they're going to be destined for a rematch in the AFC Championship with the Kansas City Chiefs for the second straight year in a row, which is why this is a big game. If you are one of those folks who believes that the Steelers can make a Super Bowl run, this game and the rest of the second half of this season is going to show us just how far the Steelers can go come playoff time. The Broncos versus the Falcons is the most underrated game that nobody's talking about for week 11 of the NFL season, because you got two teams where the question that you're asking is, are you good or are you only taking advantage of the weaker teams that you play on your schedule? Because the Denver Broncos are 0-4 this year against teams with winning records. And the Atlanta Falcons, they're 1-2 against teams this year that have records above 500. Yeah, they beat the Philadelphia Eagles, but they lost to the Steelers and they lost to the Chiefs. You have two teams where it still is hard to gauge just how truly good they are. We know that the Falcons are going to be a playoff team, but how far can they go in the playoffs? We really don't know. And the Denver Broncos, certain weeks when you watch them, you think they can be a playoff team, but then they struggle at being able to beat some of the elite teams in the AFC. So this is a game where you got pretty much two evenly matched football teams that are playoff caliber. They're not more so like elite, but they're really good teams. And for the Denver Broncos, you know, if you can beat Atlanta, it shows that you can at least beat the average to above average teams that you have to play on your schedule. Like, you can beat a team like the Chargers when you play them again if you can beat Atlanta. And for Atlanta, if you can beat the Denver Broncos, then it shows that you're able to win games that are a little bit of a dogfight. Because one thing that I've noticed about the Falcons this year is that a lot of their wins come in high-scoring games. But I want to know, can the Falcons win a 14-10 defensive slugfest? Because we saw them lose that kind of game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Bo Nix has started to heat up as of late. His last 6 games, he's thrown 9 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. Against Kansas City, he absolutely surprised me. And be honest, he probably surprised y'all too. Most of us were not expecting Bo Nix to play as well as what he did against the Chiefs. He completed 73% of his passes, 2 touchdowns for 215 yards passing, and no interceptions. And with how well Bo Nix played, you were really confident that the Broncos were going to win that game, but the Chiefs just have some black magic around them that doesn't allow them to lose. And the Falcons' defense has been their Achilles heel this year. This is average to below average defense. Many Falcons fans have been calling for them to make a change at defensive coordinator with Jimmy Lake, because your defense is 20th against the run, which we know the Broncos like to run the football a lot, and they're 24th against the pass. And they also are the worst team in the NFL at getting after the quarterback. They're 32nd in sacks per game. So you look at how well the Broncos have played offensively in their last couple of games, not including against the Baltimore Ravens, because the Ravens are just an outright more talented team than Denver. You know, the Atlanta Falcons defense is going to get challenged in this game. And if they get torched by Bo Nix, I don't think the Falcons can make a deep playoff run. I know a few weeks ago I came on here and said that the Falcons could be a little bit of a sleeper team, but it's like, once you get deeper into the playoffs, you got to have somewhat of a defense that can come through in big moments. And the Falcons do have some good players on defense. You do have Jesse Bates, who's the best safety in the league, in my opinion. You do got A.J. Terrell, who's having a great season. And Matthew Judon, he looked pretty good for the first couple of weeks. What's happened to him? What's happened to the pass rush? You know, this defense just overall isn't dependable when you go up against teams that have somewhat competent quarterback play, which is why you have a Falcons team that's been 5-2 against teams below 500. You swept the Bucs. They aren't doing so good right now. You beat the Panthers, and you split with the Saints when really you would have won that game if your field goal kicker knew how to kick the ball. So with the next 3 weeks that the Atlanta Falcons have to go up against not just the Broncos this week, but the Chargers and the Vikings coming up, this is going to be the stretch that defines what this team is going to be once we get into the month of December and we prepare for postseason football, because the Falcons are going to be a playoff team. I don't see the Buccaneers being able to rally and turn their season around. I think they probably are going to be more so a 7-8 win team. The Falcons probably should be a 10-win team. But the same issue that the Falcons have, struggling against teams that are above 500, is the same problem the Broncos have. The Broncos, nearly all their wins, as a matter of fact, all their wins have come against teams with losing records. The Panthers, the Saints, the Raiders, the Jets. You got to be able to beat a team like Atlanta if you want to be a playoff team, because you're not going to make it to the playoffs just beating up bottom feeders. You could end up missing out on the 7th seed and you finish 9-8 because you are unable to beat a quality team like Atlanta. Atlanta is not Baltimore. It's unfair to try to use that Baltimore game as justification for what the Broncos are, because we know that game's a mismatch. However, this game against the Falcons is an even game to me, because you got one team that has a high-powered offense with Kirk Cousins, B. John Robinson, Kyle Pitts, and Drake London, and you got a Broncos defense that's been one of the biggest surprises in the NFL. And Bo Nix, if he continues to play the way he has these last couple of games against Atlanta, I believe the Broncos walk away with this win. And I had one of my homies who does a lot of sports betting. He asked me, JT, you should talk about why Vegas has the Broncos as a favorite in this game. And I said, that's a good point, because when I first was looking at this game a few days ago, I thought that the Falcons would be favored, because I felt like the Falcons, from a talent standpoint, had the better team. But even though the Falcons are more talented, the Broncos are a more complete team than what the Falcons are. Yes, their offense isn't as good as what Atlanta's is. And if this is a game that ends up becoming a shootout and the Falcons end up getting a 30, the Broncos are going to lose, because the Broncos are not a team that is built to win games that end up being high scoring, just because, you know, the more you ask Bo Nix to throw the football, the higher chance you're going to have of him throwing the interception. It's one thing to go 22 or 30. It's another thing when you're asking a guy that to throw 35, 40 times to keep up with this Falcons offense, because eventually he's going to make a mistake or two. If the Broncos are going to win this game, they're going to have to keep this thing relatively low scoring. Anytime the Falcons get in low scoring games and they got to rely on their defense, they get in trouble. The Falcons want to win games by being able to just overpower you with their firepower on offense, which could happen, but I don't really know, because I do believe that this is a Broncos defense that's more than capable of being able to slow down this Falcons offense. The last time the Falcons went against a defense as good as what the Broncos is was week 1 against the Steelers, and we saw Kirk Cousins struggle in that game. And Vance Joseph, he's been sending a lot of pressure this year. When you can get after Kirk Cousins, you know he's not the most mobile guy in the world, he can get himself in trouble. And Kirk Cousins is also a guy who at times he can unravel in certain situations, like we saw him do against New Orleans. He did throw a couple of picks in that game that cost them to lose that one as well. So I like the Broncos to win this one, which is a little bit surprising, because I was kind of leaning Atlanta. But the more I think about it, the more I talk myself into it, I like the Broncos to win, because they just are a more complete team. And from what we've seen out of Atlanta, if every game isn't a high-scoring affair, if every game they play isn't a high-scoring affair, then their chances of winning greatly diminish, because they're not a team that can win with their defense, because their defense is not really that dependable. The only reason why the Broncos won't be able to score a lot of points is just because of the style of their offense. You know, they're more so of a ball control offense. They want to get the ball out fast, and they pick and choose when they like to attack the field vertically. But most of the times they want to run the football. And when you're a team that has that run-first approach, most of your games are not going to be shootouts. And just with Bo Nix being so up and down as a rookie, you know, like, there's going to be some moments where you ask him to throw it a little bit more than what you have over these last couple of weeks, and he ends up throwing an interception to Jesse Bates. But overall, I like the Broncos to win, just because I believe with how well their defense has played and how hot Bo Nix has been these last couple of weeks, they're going to be able to play the style of football that they want to play, keeping this a low-scoring game, focusing on ball control, letting their defense do more stuff, the heavy lifting for them. And I can see the Broncos winning this thing 19-14, 19-17. This is going to be a close game no matter what. But I do like the Broncos to win this one with how good their defense is. The game of the week that we're all going to be watching are the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Buffalo Bills. Can the Bills be the first team to deliver the first L of the year to the Kansas City Chiefs? Because, listen, I'm not somebody that likes to say these NFL games are scripted, they're rigged, but I would be lying to y'all if I didn't feel there just was a little bit of black magic around Kansas City, because this is the only team that I've seen that can play bad football and still win. This is the only team I've seen where it looks like they're down and out, and they still find a way to pull a rabbit out of the hat and walk away with the W, such as what happened last week. You know, what were the odds that Denver goes for a game-winning field goal and you just block it? You feel me? The Kansas City Chiefs are just a hard team to beat. You got to beat them. And what I mean by you have to beat Kansas City is that you have to be able to take over the game in the fourth quarter. That's the biggest reason why the Chiefs are 9-0 right now, because they play their best football the final 15 minutes. That's always something that this team has done well, not just during this season, but during the Super Bowl run last year and the year before that. Anytime Mahomes is down and out, once you get into the fourth quarter, as long as there's some time left and he has some chances to get the ball in his hands, he's going to come through, which is why the Buffalo Bills, they got to be able to be on the aggressive in this game. When you get into the fourth quarter, you can't be conservative. You need to be going for deep shots. You need to be super aggressive in your play calling, because you got to deliver the knockout blow to Kansas City. You just can't settle by trying to beat this team by winning field goals and trying to play it safe. No, you need to go out there, land some haymakers, be aggressive, and you can never get satisfied. Just because you could go up 27-3 at halftime doesn't mean you got the game won. When you play Kansas City, you completely have to annihilate this team. You can't give them any room to come back. You can't. You got to make sure that the outcome is not in question. Because when you give the Chiefs just a little bit of breathing room, they slither into that hole and they find a way to finesse the win. And the Buffalo Bills, surprisingly, despite their shortcomings against this team in the playoffs, they've won 3 straight games against Kansas City in the regular season. And the Buffalo Bills offense has been more explosive this year than Kansas City. You see, they always say that styles make fights, where you have two offenses that have two different styles of football that they play. The Bills' offense is more explosive. They are 9th in the league in yards per play, and they're 10th in yards per pass. You got more weapons on offense than Kansas City. Khalil Shakir has been having a breakout season for Buffalo. You got James Cook, who's been really good as well. And the status of wide receiver Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid is currently questionable. Both of those guys are on the injury report. We don't know if they're going to suit up or not. But even if they don't play, you still have more than enough with how good Josh Allen is and with you having a top 3 offensive line to pull off this win. Because Kansas City's offense, although they are a tad bit more explosive since they made the trade for DeAndre Hopkins, he's been making a lot of big plays in the vertical passing game for them. This is an offense that, contrary to the Buffalo Bills, they're more methodical. They're more efficient. They're second in the league in time of possession. And they're one of those offenses that they don't need to have a big play. They don't need to score a touchdown in 30, 40 seconds. They are more than okay with having those 15, 16-yard drives that go for 7, 6 minutes long. And they're really good at moving the chains. They are the best team in the NFL when it comes to converting and third down situations at 52%. That's why they're a more efficient, more methodical offense, because they take their times and they pick and choose their spots. You don't just see Patrick Mahomes spamming deep throws. What you see is a team that, when they do take their deep shots, they're really calculated with how they do so. So if you're the Buffalo Bills, you got to make sure that you take advantage of every opportunity you touch the ball, because you can't afford to have any wasted possessions, because the Kansas City Chiefs are one of those teams that, okay, let's say that you go 3 and out in the fourth quarter, right? And you got 8 minutes left. You give the ball back to Kansas City and they got a lead. Those last 8 minutes, they could drain all of that clock and not give you another opportunity to touch the football, which is why I started out this segment saying how the Bills have to be the aggressor in this game. They got to be on the Chiefs like white on rice. You got to come out trying to deliver haymakers. You just got to try to knock them out early and try to just leave no room for doubt. You want to go up 35-10 at halftime. That's what the goal should be for Buffalo. You can't be coming into this game if you're Sean McDermott not being willing to roll the dice on fourth down. You can't be accepting field goals. You have to come away with touchdowns when you play Kansas City. Because a lot of the reasons why they keep winning these games is that you have a lot of coaches that are so scared at taking chances, being aggressive, that they overthink it and they play it safe. You're never going to beat this team playing it safe. We've seen it against the Buccaneers. We've seen it last year in the Super Bowl. Like, if you get into any situation where it's 4th and 3, 4th and 5, and you're on the opposite side of the 50, you go for it. Who cares about field goals? You're not going to beat Kansas City by kicking field goals. You're going to beat this team by putting a 7 on the scoreboard consistently. That's the only way you can beat Kansas City. Kansas City, they don't need to score touchdowns when they can just play their game and pick their spots. But you, on the other hand, you got to be the aggressor. You're not KC. And the Bills do have a good defense. They got a really good pass rush that should be able to take advantage of Kansas City's inconsistent offensive line, especially with their left tackle position being in somewhat of some chaos. I like Kansas City to win this game, however. Listen, I'm sorry. I know y'all going to be mad at me. I just don't know, man. I really don't. Because Patrick Mahomes, over the last couple of weeks, has picked up his level of play. He's had 2 straight games now where he hasn't thrown an interception. He has a touchdown-interception ratio 6-1. You know, he's been really good. And with the way Kansas City has just won some of these games, it just makes me believe that this team is probably going to finish. Can't trust. But I just think that Kansas City is going to find a way to get it done like always. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before I get up on out of here, I want to give you guys my 5 best bets for Week 11 of the NFL season. Let's go. My lock of the week, I'm taking Detroit. Let's go. My lock of the week, I'm taking Detroit. That's a 13-point favorite against the Jags. A 13-point favorite against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Listen, as a Jacksonville resident, I've watched a lot of Jags just giving up easy interceptions. He's Thomas Jr. Defense has been hardly here that much because the Dolphins able to hang against great offense. Green gets active winning streaks against the Bears, and with Chicago having to make winning streaks against the Bears, and with Chicago having to make a change at offensive coordinator, the Packers are coming off a bye. I expect Green Bay to be able to slaughter the Bears. It's just Caleb Williams hasn't thrown a touchdown pass in over a month. The Bears defense also is a little bit overhyped as well. And this is going to be a game where Jordan Love, I think, starts to kind of play a little bit more mistake-free. He's been really turnover prone these last couple of weeks since he came back from his injury. And we saw around this, and I think the Packers are going to cover this game, and they probably win by 2 scores. Point underdog. This game, Cool is one of the better kickers. Point underdog. This game, Cool is one of the better kickers in the NFL. And for him to miss 3 field goals in one game is something that doesn't really occur that often. So they did get a little lucky in that game. Yeah, they get a little bit of juice because they make the head coaching change and you go to an interim head coach. But I believe that the Browns should be able to slow down that offense. They don't really have too much to work with. And I do think that Myles Garrett takes this game over. And